Have you watched the movie Idiocracy? This film depicts a future in which humanity becomes increasingly stupid because wealthy and intelligent people have fewer children, while poor and foolish people have many more. Instead of the typical high-tech sci-fi future, it paints a profoundly dystopian picture. In the film, there's hardly anyone left who pursues intellectual goals or has critical thinking skills. Everyone speaks a crude, expletive-filled language. Meanwhile, corporations have taken over every aspect of life. Advertisements and brand names are everywhere. One company called Brown Dough supplies all the water in the country, having replaced water sources with a Gatorade-like beverage. Fields are irrigated with this ridiculous liquid, so agriculture has collapsed. The movie revolves around events to resolve this big problem. In the future, the government is extremely chaotic and functions like a reality show. The justice system is entirely arbitrary. The environment is devastated by negligence, and science has disappeared. Society has practically collapsed, but somehow still limps along. I won't go into specifics about certain events to avoid spoilers. I do think the film is worth watching for its place in cinema history. In this conversation, we'll examine the core premise of the movie. Do we really get dumber as the wealthy or smart have fewer children, while the poor or stupid have many? In the future of human evolution, is there a possibility we won't become a more intelligent species, but instead a crowd of hollow-brained folks who can't lift their heads from watching ads? At this point, we need to scrutinize the film's claims about natural selection and evolution. Natural selection can appear to choose the fastest or the smartest at times, but what it really does is preserve traits that increase an organism's chances of surviving and reproducing in its environment. Speed, intelligence, or strength gets selected only if it confers advantages. However, every trait has its costs. As intelligence increases, the brain grows and consumes more energy. We reduce muscle strength or other potential traits in order to support our brains. This trade-off shows that natural selection does not exclusively pick the fastest or the smartest. Environmental conditions, energy constraints, and genetic diversity determine the course of evolution. So the film's suggestion that society becomes dumber when the smartest reproduce less, while the dumbest reproduce more, deserves a closer look from an evolutionary standpoint. Modern medicine and science now enable even the most vulnerable individuals to survive and reproduce. Yet, we do see an inverse correlation between education level and number of children. As women's education rises, the number of children they have decreases, a worldwide phenomenon. Therefore, when uneducated groups tend to have more children, there's a concern that average intelligence might decline. But the reality is not so cut and dried. The most familiar method for measuring intelligence is IQ testing, but IQ does not capture 100% of anyone's intelligence. A series of test results can yield a single G factor, yet even that doesn't fully describe intelligence. Moreover, a high IQ does not guarantee success, just as a low IQ does not always spell failure. Numerous factors, personality, motivation, environment, and education, come into play. Hence, saying more children among the uneducated will make humanity dumber is too reductionist. There's also the Flynn Effect. From 1942 to 2008, average IQ scores rose by 14 points, an average of about 3 points per decade. Explanations include better education, nutrition, healthcare, and improvements in the environment. Even though some areas have noted slight declines in recent years, the long-term trend has been generally upward. Meanwhile, there is data suggesting wealthy men are now having more children. Thus, the claim that only the poor and uneducated are reproducing at higher rates isn't absolute. Huge cultural and economic differences exist between nations. The high population growth rate in some African countries, for example, is not, by itself, sufficient to conclude humanity is getting dumber. We must also remember that infant mortality rates can still be quite high in those regions. All these factors cast serious doubt on Idiocracy's premise that humanity is steadily getting dumber. The threat isn't as imminent as the movie suggests. In fact, average intelligence steadily rose for almost a century. An uptick in behavior that some might label stupid may be linked to social and political polarization or the influence of media, but that doesn't equal a genetic decline in intelligence. Certainly, the film stokes fears that humanity might collapse under the weight of stupid people reproducing too much. These fears echo sentiments historically wielded by far-right or racist ideologies, scapegoating certain groups. Conspiracy theories like the Great Replacement Theory claim that groups with low birth rates will be supplanted by those with higher birth rates, resulting in cultural, genetic, or social devastation. History shows most such dire predictions fail. Moreover, when migration and birth rates are managed effectively, assimilation, integration, education, and cultural exchange come into play. Over generations, people become culturally more alike or intermixed. Even within groups presumed homogeneous, internal differences emerge. Diversity grows. Hence, the notion, someday they'll take over, is simplistic and fear-based. In conclusion, Idiocracy uses humor to present an extreme vision of the future. However, current scientific evidence indicates average intelligence is in fact on the rise, propelled by improved education, healthcare, nutrition, and other positive developments. Socioeconomic inequalities and cultural differences may influence birth rates, but they don't automatically mean a mass dumbing down. As technology and science advance, disadvantages can be mitigated, while resolving remaining issues calls for political, social, and economic resolve. The likelihood of a world of fools like the one in the movie doesn't appear to be just around the corner. While Idiocracy can be fun, taking its premise at face value can be both incorrect and dangerous. Such a viewpoint may fuel xenophobic or racist rhetoric, potentially spurring fear and hostility toward diverse communities around the world. In the end, even if there were a mechanism by which low-intelligence individuals reproduce rapidly, improvements in modern healthcare and education generate far greater overall cognitive gains. Coupled with changes in childbearing among wealthy and educated individuals, cross-cultural interactions, and the Flynn Effect, humanity is not headed toward a mindless future. I hope this relieves some of your concerns about the film. Admittedly, in increasingly polarized times, various catastrophe scenarios gain popularity. Yet current data suggests that humanity's cultural, scientific, and intellectual capital persists in moving forward. Idiocracy may still be entertaining, but it's important to be cautious with oversimplified ideas, especially when they can be politically exploited. Finally, consider the example of rich thieves, those who steal trivial items despite vast wealth, reminding us that human nature is complex. Intelligence or financial power alone doesn't explain everything. Human behavior arises from the sum of cultural values, psychological needs, and personal circumstances. So progress requires much more than just avoiding dumbing down fears. Until our next conversation, take care.